All right. Good? I think we're good. Big old cut fallen tree is my tripod. So, my name is Evan Strong, and I normally make videos like this, content geared around the lacing of our shoes, the tying of our shoes, and the things within the clothing that we wear that alter our body's natural working position. And I show little tiny modifications. I have my lacing technique, which is a prerequisite. I always talk about tying the shoes evenly over toward the inside, which is a prerequisite, and then removing the tags from the tongues of the shoes up the entirety of everything you wear. And those things being prerequisites just to allow the body to be able to have its natural functioning center line, natural rotations, and natural ability, natural balance and strength. And yeah, because the body works, and the body works very well within our own personal experiences and situations. We are all made in the image of our God, Jesus the Christ. So we are all universal, at least structurally, within our very, very, very slight differences. And so my content, I normally focus on the clothing that we actually place on our bodies. So prerequisites, as I just said: lace the shoes with my technique you can find within my content. Make sure you're tying your shoes evenly, because that travels up the entire body. And I'm always talking about internal rotation, how most people lack internal rotation. And in 2024, today's the 7th of September, 2024, most people are in a chronic, just meaning a state they're stuck in until it's fixed, state of external rotation, rather than being active internal on the arches of the feet slightly pointed in, shoulders allowing the scapula, which are your shoulder blades on your back, to be able to wrap up and around to really open and expand your rib cage. So that's just the natural body position we all would be in, again, within our slight personal situations. Maybe you have something within your own situation, within your own body, whether it's you're missing part of your body, or it's a deformity you were born with, or something that happened surgery-wise. But the foundation of the body structurally is all universally designed. So really, the clothing is the key to just getting a natural, open body position, the way that it would be until we place modern clothing on it. So if you have seen any Webster tutorials, what I want you to do, for the sake of my video right here, is take everything that you've learned or heard from any Webster tutorial and kind of just set it aside for this video, and watch this as if you're coming in fresh. The big thing that I always talk about just with the body and its natural positioning is how I'm standing right now, an internal openness. And you want to keep your body in an open position as much as you can, because that way you're just allowed, I'm just in a public place, so it's fine, but that way you're just allowed to breathe, you're allowed to reach, you're allowed to elevate, and you're allowed to just go through life without getting fatigued as often as people are nowadays getting fatigued. So a movement like a Webster is actually no different, because, as I say, everything within our lives is just about positioning. It's just about keeping the body in its natural working position, and then it'll just do what it needs to when it comes time. So things like this, other than it being an unfamiliar movement if you haven't done it before, it isn't something you need to work up to. It's something that you just need to keep your body in a position to be able to do. You notice this openness, right? I've mentioned so often we should not have to stretch unless something major happens to our bodies. We should not be exercising just for the sake of exercising, as far as going on runs and those kind of things. And I make these very bold claims, and I say that bold claims can be bold if they're true, because I go into very great depth on how these things are true, and again, I use myself as an example in these videos, and the way that my body works now and has been transformed is through the clothing modifications that I have done. So some big things within how your clothing fits before we get into the actual movement of a Webster are your seams on your shoulders should be at the edges of your shoulders. If they get farther down from the edges, then you're going to be in a state of external rotation. So by having your shoulder seams stop pretty much right at the edge of your shoulders, it allows you to lift and have motion and rotation in your shoulders. And if you have too big of a shirt, it's going to be very hard to do anything in life, but especially a movement like this that requires so much lift and openness. Because when you do that kind of lift position, there needs to be a pivot point at the shoulders. Another thing I talk about is that the top seams need to sit behind your shoulders. Just same kind of thing. When you're going to do a lift with your shoulder frontward in a plane on the anterior part of your body, you need those seams to actually be out of the way in order for that to happen. So another thing is, when we're talking about opening the hips into internal rotation, just to be in a natural working position, you need to have the waistline of your pants up above your hips. Because if you have your pants on those hips, it's actually closing them down into external rotation, a collapsing of the arches. So just to have a natural openness to the hips, you need those pants to be out of the way for that to be able to happen, for the whole pelvis to be able to posteriorly tuck and open the hips. Okay, I'm gonna step back here. We'll let these guys move over a little bit, and I'm gonna show you. So right here, what I'm going to use is, this is actually just a ramp they've made for bikes, right? Mountain bikes, so you can just jump. There's no landing really, no like down ramp necessarily. There's just kind of a little kicker takeoff, which is actually a pretty good thing to do a Webster off of. If you're going to be doing this movement, especially for the first time, I'd say having a little step up is probably one of the easiest approaches. That's what I would say. So, staying in this internally rotated position. When the pants are above the hips, it's important for the front to at least be level with the rear, if not slightly higher in the front than in the rear, because that way your pelvis can posteriorly rotate, and internal rotation of the legs will just come from that. So anyway, staying in this open position of the pelvis, you notice how my feet are on the outsides, and that like I just said, that's what tucks that pelvis posteriorly, is by allowing those feet to come up and out with my lacing technique. So if you haven't heard any of my content, this might seem a little bit foreign, but it is true that this movement will be very hard universally, because I have done it in the past and it was so much harder when my shoes were not laced with my technique, when they were not tied even, and when my pants were not above my hips, when my shirt did not fit behind my shoulders on the top seams and at my shoulders. Those things are absolute musts, because otherwise you're just going to be fighting the position that your clothing is placing your body in, just trying to function anyway. So we need to be able to naturally get open on the outsides of the feet. Can you see my feet? Watch my feet. Okay? It's like a rolling up and out of the feet, right? Because when you go into this position, the reason that I said to kind of forget everything that you've heard from any other tutorial, at least for the time you watch this video, is this position that is required, again, just the natural functioning position of the body, in order to stay open throughout the movement, is an internal position. right? It's like it's an opening internally. You can see my scapulas. I show my scapulas like this a lot in my content. It's a wrapping up and around the body of the scapulas to open that rib cage and get you open. So when you go to step up to the takeoff of what you're going to do the Webster on, you don't need a lot of speed. You don't. Because if you're going to sprint to your takeoff and then you're going to go up, your front foot is almost going to like stop you in a sense. Really, you only need the amount of motion that you need, the amount of what's the word? You only need to be going fast enough into it to get some lift, to keep that motion going through the flip. So you don't need to run into it, because that will actually make it harder for you, because that front takeoff leg will then be doing more work, almost like slowing down your run. So really just take a few steps into it and just keep that internally open position as you get there. You want something that's a high enough step to where you can stay open, because if the step's really small, then you're almost gonna have to close your hips to get a bend, to get lift. You want it high enough to where you can stay open and just kind of push like this. If you can see how my hips stay posteriorly tucked, because there's enough bend to where I can stay open. So it's an open and an internal lift. What you're gonna do is when your front foot gets onto it, notice the openness. Keep that pelvis. I don't want to say stay conscious of anything through it, because you shouldn't really be focusing intellectually on it. It's an entire body's movement while keeping that pelvis tucked, because that way, if that pelvis stays tucked, you stay open. So as that front foot hits, pelvis stays tucked. While it's tucked, as I mentioned, internal rotation, you swing this rear leg. Internal rotation, right? Open, stay open, and swing that rear leg. With your arms, they're almost going up. If you picture like a parachute, or even like one of those flying squirrels, if you know, like those squirrel suits that people wear with or like the wing suits, you know, picture an opening as if like you're catching air with a parachute, because that way you're going to lift. You're gonna keep going up as you jump and as you swing, right? So I'll kind of do this motion a few times right here before I move to the actual takeoff of where the flip is going to happen. Because keep those scapulas open, keep your hips open, and just lift internal, right? So you'll come in, again, it's not necessary to run. A few steps, you'll come in and you'll just stay open. So it looks like this. I'll do it on flat without the actual flip. Okay, I'll do that 2 more times so you can kind of see it's just focus on an entire body's motion. You don't need to focus on a specific kick, a specific thing within the arms. Just focus on the entire body staying open and working as one to get you a lift into the air. So I'll do that 2 more times. Woo! It's kind of hard to do fully without coming off the ground, because your body's all working together to lift you. I'll do 1 more. Okay, arms, internal, legs, internal, because if you look at my toes, they're pointing in, which keeps my hips open, okay? So it's an internal full body lift. All right, so I'll do a few and we'll, I'll give a visual. I'm gonna kind of rest because I also just woke up less than 40 minutes ago. So I'll wait. Some people are walking. I also seriously need to breathe for a second. All right, but it's an entire body's movement, because the way that doing anything within life is going to use the least amount of energy is allowing your body to work as a whole, everything incorporated into the movement. So that's what you want to do. You don't want a certain part of your body doing more work than another part, because then you're going to go into it imbalanced and pull essentially yourself out of your natural openness at that point, because part of your body is doing more work than the rest in that case. So I'm gonna do one. Again, focus on the positioning of the internal and how that keeps me open. Focus on how the entire body is doing the movement, but not only that, but it's at the same time in conjunction with everything else. It's an opening and a lift, and then once I get off the ground, you'll tuck. But I'm gonna do one first, and then if we need to discuss the tuck, we'll do that. I've had no food or water either, so I'm actually a little bit shaky right now, if I'm transparent. All right, I'll do one. So remember, you don't need to run into it. Just get a few good steps. Right now I'm about 15 feet away from it. And you just go into it with the intent of staying open. Just stay open and internal through the movement. So here we go. And what I like about this video and that landing is that was a little bit rough. I didn't do any warm-ups, any exercises. Like I said, I just barely woke up. So this is kind of almost as raw as it gets, in a sense. I'll do a few more. They'll improve a little bit as I do them. Don't think I've ever done one off of this. The dirt's hard. I'm in barefoot shoes. And the other things I said. So, in a sense, it's almost as if like I'm doing similar to what you might be doing your first few times, because it's going a little bit rough, right? I like that. So they're gonna improve next couple ones, because again, I just woke up. But just that internal lift, it's almost as if you're, I just don't want to give a word, like an image where you have to see it in a certain way. Just feel it how it feels, but it is a hollowing. And I've talked about internal rotation all the time, and that's what I say. It's a hollowing toward your center line, right? If you watch my hands, like when I talk and I do this, it's the same thing, but more, a little bit like bigger, right? You're coming essentially like this, opening, wrapping your scapulas around, keeping your hips tucked, outsides of the feet, and open. Stay open through the entire movement. That's what's gonna help it. Just stay open. Okay, I'll do a few more. Ideally, I need to land it a little bit better than that for the sake of a visual. I'm gonna just retie this shoe a little bit tighter. Shoes tied over toward the inside, or else you won't be able to have internal rotation, because that knot will actually pull your foot external, and all of your core will be deactivated. So, and especially, yeah, I mean, you have to stay internal through the entirety of the movement. I'll wait for these guys to pass, and we'll go again. All right. Internal lift, as if the center of you is like a parachute. Entire body's movement, all is one. Just take a few steps. You don't need to sprint into it. Don't even really need to run. And just allow the entire body to work all at the same time. Okay, do another one. There's also a storm drain thing right after the jump. So that kind of makes it a little bit different for this specific case. All right. Ouch! This is honestly hard ground. Very hard. I want to land it better because I mean I can do this flip well. I haven't done it in a long time, but that hurts. The biggest thing is trying to clear the storm drain that ends here. I'm flipping from like here, and so I'm kind of almost even subconsciously trying to get distance rather than like lift, and that alters the way the flip happens. So I want to land in this softer dirt stuff, which is not compact dirt. It's got a lot of more squishy stuff in it, because ideally I land it pretty well so that you can see. Because the point with staying open is when you land, you want to come down on the outsides of your feet, light and open. And so if you can stay open, meaning internal, through the whole movement, then you don't have to try to adjust for your landing. You're just already open. And that didn't quite happen in those first couple flips. So really the distance is the big one, trying to get over that storm drain. Even without thinking about it, it's like there, and so it alters, because sometimes when you're doing a Webster, you'll feel like you're reaching rather than lifting. And you notice the difference in a lift and how that can tuck you more. Like if you look at my pelvis, right? If I'm lifting, I tuck here. But if I'm trying to reach, you almost go anterior rather than posterior, because you want to get toward your center line to really just tuck. And so it's more of a lift than a jump. If you look at my back, you don't want to be in an anterior position. You want to be neutral, centered. So the farther you have to reach, look at this position of the back, right? Rather than like an up, okay? I'm gonna go just kind of off to the side. It's not really ideal, that angle, just because there's trees right here that are kind of almost in the way. But I'll land it better because I'm not gonna go far. I'm gonna kind of lift. Also, my laces are actually paracord, so they have zero give, and my high tops are kind of stiff around my Achilles, which does slightly limit my plantar flexion. But again, you'll be able to see the difference in me going up rather than trying to clear that storm drain and going out. And maybe that's why I chose this location, like without knowing, because that's a good example for a visual. All right, let me see just how the best way to step up to this is going to be with this tree right here. Okay, so watch this one. Again, watch the openness, the lift, it's kind of a lift from like the center of you, like that, as if you're almost getting like hit and it's pushing you up, right? Like that. Outsides of the feet, opening, the swing in conjunction, both arms and legs, and then toward the center line. So watch this one. There's people coming, so I'll do it real quick. Phew. I like this tutorial too because, like I said, it's raw. I'm not landing them like how you might think is like ideal. And that's good because, again, I mean, that might be how a lot of your first ones will be. I'll do a few more because probably we'll get one pretty good again for the sake of a visual. Rest for a second, let these people pass for a second. And yeah, because I really do appreciate laces that don't have very much give. But in a movement like this, what that does is in my high tops, limit the, like I said, flexion of my ankle just slightly, because these are a pretty stiff material, upper of the high tops. It's like this canvasy material. So yeah, let's I'd love to give a good visual, just while this is still going, make a way where I can do one with some more lift and more height so you can see. So, you know my content at all. You know I'm a very, just like raw person. I don't really care about it being all perfect production value. I'm trying to get the point across. So this part here is kind of cool. I'm looking for something that I can use. There's tons of logs right here, but they're pretty big to move. All right, hold on. Yeah, this thing's big. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna use it though. I moved it this much, I might as well actually use it. So I'm gonna bring this over. I'm just gonna put it in the frame where we're already at. And can you see where that grass is pretty well? Okay. This is much more ideal. So I'm going to use the log as a takeoff. In a lot of cases, it's actually much better to have a solid, like, visual perception wise takeoff, to where on the ramp, you can hit it at any point. But with the log, it gives you this very distinct, like, I'm gonna place my foot exactly on this log, to where your run up will then be more calculated, right? Because the spacing between your front and rear foot wants to be the right spacing to allow the position that you need to be in. And if you don't know exactly what you're going to take off from, sometimes you'll almost be reaching too far, and now you're not in a position where you can really lift. You want to keep your chest, like I'm saying, internal and open. And so if you can keep your foot at this spacing, depending on what your leg length is,
to where you can just feel yourself staying open, right? If I were to reach clear out here, I'm like closing down into external rotation. And if I were to be too close to myself, closing down a little bit. You want your hips to stay open, and so keeping that spacing between the front and rear leg to where your hips can just stay in an open position. So this will be way better. I'm gonna just kind of launch off this. I'll land a lot better, get a lot more height. Same exact motion, but this will also show that it's important to have, well, this is cool too, because biblically, right, I love to throw the gospel and things, a firm foundation to jump off of. That's awesome. And you'll see what that does, because the flip will be much, much better. Okay, same exact thing, staying open, internal lift, entire body movement, and now you can see my run up better also, because you can see where I'm starting. And it's not much of a run. Just a few good steps to get some momentum, carry the momentum through. As you're stepping, try not to let that step take away from your momentum, but just transfer it while staying open through the movement. All right. Oh, we'll let these girls pass real quick. Yeah, and the reason I'm doing it off of a step up also rather than, because this is a movement you can do on the ground, or you can do it off of like, done off of picnic tables a lot of the time, or that kind of ledge, like 2-3 foot high ledge. With the step up, it allows a deeper bend in the hips to where you can really get like a lot of posterior activation. In this whole motion, in the whole movement, you want to feel the activation, as I always talk about within internal rotation, in your glutes and in your hamstrings. It's a movement just like any natural movement. Not that this is a very common thing naturally to do, but it's a natural in the sense of an open position. It needs to be focused in the rear, the activation of the muscles, because that's the only way you'll stay open, right? So this is going to be a lot better for visual to be able to see, and the flip itself will be easier for me to do, and it will just end up better. So, and you get to see the dude jump a little bit. All right, ready? So, same thing as I was saying, exactly the same, except in this case, it's a log, okay? Very distinct takeoff point. So, the openness, open and internal. All right, here we go. I slipped on something. You probably saw my ankle. I kind of like jittered a little bit on the step before the log. But see how much better I was able to flip? Very solid thing to take off of. The dirt's packed really pretty solid, but in this case, there's something different about having an actual thing besides just the ground to take off from. I'm going to do a few of them because this is way better. Like I said, I knew it was going to be. I've done thousands of flips like this, Websters, for over a decade. I really can do them quite well when I'm in practice. I say that for the sake of, I really am qualified to teach, at least to a degree, this flip, because I have done it a lot. So I'll do a few more. They'll probably get better each time. Just watch the openness. I'll probably do 4 or 5 at least, just so you can get visuals and just keep seeing it and see maybe tweaks that I'm personally doing within it that are helping the flip each time. Okay, here we go. And you can see where I'm starting. I've probably got what, 4, 5, 6 steps is all. It's not a run. It's just some momentum. And I do this when I'm like showing it before I do it. As I always show, it's just rotating. It's a rotation inwards. And you can watch that when I actually do the flip. All right, here we go. Okay, step up, stay open, internal, and lift from the center. Here we go. Oh man, these shoes are just a little bit restrictive on the ankles. honestly not the ideal shoes to be doing flips in. Definitely not. But I'll do a few more. This is really not at all how I imagined this tutorial going, but I like it. This is very, very real. What I'm gonna do for this one, I've got all sorts of debris on the takeoff. What I'm gonna do for this one is just take a couple steps, just to show it's really not about the momentum, and the less that you make it about the speed going into it, the more you can just feel into the flip, right? So I'll just start like from right here. I'll take just a couple steps, and this is what it looks like, right? You step in, step, come in, and lift, right? Because it's about the lift. It's about the activation of the body as a whole. It's not about the speed. Ready? Woo. And when I tuck for a Webster, it's like this. I don't really know if there's an ideal way to tuck for a Webster that like works better, like kind of universally, but I don't think about it, which is, you shouldn't really be thinking about it, because that way it's more of a feeling into it. But the reason I only tuck with my right hand is because when you're swinging your left rear leg, at least in my case is my left one that's in the back, you come like this, and then this right arm, after it lifts, kind of just grabs that leg that's already so much more in front. And then you don't have to like alter things to try to get a tighter tuck. What I'm gonna do on this one is focus on the tuck. I'm gonna kind of exaggerate the tuck a little bit to show a couple things, because yes, if you tuck tighter, again, while still staying open, which kind of just happens when you're tucking, because I always say going into internal rotation is a tuck. But the tighter you tuck, as long as you're not altering the positioning, you will get a faster rotation. So on this one, I'm going to kind of exaggerate the tightness of the tuck a little bit, just so we can see what difference that makes, if any, right? So, exaggerated tuck, here we go. I like this too. Like, honestly, it's more comfortable for me to just take like 2 or 3 steps rather than even starting from where I've been starting in the first few. So I'm gonna start from right here, exaggerated tuck, everything else the same, just focusing on really getting tight while staying posterior and internal, okay? All right. I felt that a lot, and I think you can see when I landed, I was a little bit more like over my toes than the other ones, where I was kind of more back here. We want to land open, as in just a natural open internal rotation stance. But in that one you saw, I kind of landed almost over my toes because I had more rotation from just exaggerating the tightness of the tuck. So, I wonder if this guy's gonna hit some dirt jumps. I guess he's going that way. There's more of these little jumps right in here for bikes. But that's what I'm gonna show for right now. This is a flip that I have only done maybe 3 of in the past probably 6, 8, 9 months maybe. I've done thousands of them, but it's been a while. So it's a very familiar movement, kind of like how they talk about riding a bike. You know, it's, you stop doing it, but you can always kind of do it again very easily because it's a muscle memory trained motion. And I keep doing this, right? Again, internal. Okay, so that's all I'm gonna do for now. This, like I said when I started pulling that log over, is not at all how I was expecting in this tutorial to go, but I like that. It's very authentic, it's very raw, and I'm almost like not really learning how to do it through it, because again, I've done it so many times, but picking it apart like that and seeing me actually kind of struggle, especially in those first few flips, just to get around, and seeing some obstacles that you might encounter where maybe there's something where you, just because of what you're doing it on, you have to clear a distance. That will alter, like I was saying, rather than getting your height and tuck, that'll kind of take away from your momentum by trying to go farther than you need to for the movement itself. Because you noticed on the log, I was taking much shorter of a run up and doing better flips, right? So yeah, I like this because it's like a real world type of visual. So anyway, yeah, my name is Evan Strong, as I mentioned at the beginning. I'm going to be designing clothing just to allow our bodies to have their natural functions and positionings. Sit where they need to, pants above the hips, shoulder seams behind the tops of the shoulders, shoulder seams at the shoulders, to allow for just mobility. And it's going to be minimal, designed by me, Evan Strong. 100% natural materials. So look out for that when it comes. And yeah, so there's your Webster tutorial. And very, very, very different, I am sure, than probably just about any other Webster tutorial you've seen before, but it's a very real world type of example. I mean, this is as if I was just like hanging out with you and like, hey, let's learn how to do Webster. No cuts, no perfect flips or anything. So yeah, I've got a lot of content that I've placed within where my content is on a lot of its function of the human body itself, but what I focus on and what I gear everything around is the clothing that we wear, because that's how I personally allow my body to just do its natural thing. Like I said, genuine, I just woke up before I started this, probably like I said, 30 to 40 minutes before I came over here, if even. Could have been 20, 25. Didn't eat any food, didn't drink any water, I didn't stretch, I didn't warm up, I didn't do anything. The body should be in its natural position to work, and then when it comes to doing anything you need to do, it should be able to just do it within your own personal situation and your own personal body's capability. So, all right, that's how I'm gonna wrap this up. And I'm glad I did this, like right now. I'm glad that it was kind of rough. I'm glad that it is how it is, because it's real, it's authentic, so cool. Try it, don't be too worried about it. Be safe. If you need to put some pads down, you can do that. I would not recommend doing your first flips on what I was doing first here, really hard packed dirt, especially not over a metal storm drain. Do it onto the grass at least, do it into sand, get some pillows out, some pads. If you do use pillows, don't use something that's too wobbly, because when you land, your ankle just can't predict wobbly things, as I talk about with stretchy clothing. So, something firm-ish, but enough cushion to where it's going to be confidence inspiring, because if you don't quite make it perfectly around, you'll be fine. Because that honestly hurt. Those first few flips I did onto the dirt in barefoot shoes with no insoles in them, hit my heels pretty good. So, thank you for watching this, for sticking around. It's a good length video, I know, but again, really real, really raw, a lot of real world type of things you could encounter, and I have a lot of experience doing this flip. That doesn't mean that I'm like the best at the flip, but I've done thousands of them to where, especially now having the understanding of the positioning of the human body, even if my flips aren't like the best example, the way that I can explain and describe it, I really do have a lot of experience doing it under my belt. So anyway, at least if you can take anything that I've said that other people haven't, like I said at the beginning, it's probably a very different tutorial on a Webster than you've seen in other people's tutorials. So anyway, thank you. Those prerequisites are a must. Remove the tags from everything, tongues of the shoes up, lace and tie the shoes with my technique you can find within my content. Doing those things will make your flips so much easier, but they will make your entire life so much easier. And really, they're just prerequisites to allow your body to just function. Okay, thank you. I feel like there might be something else I need to say, so I'm not stopping it yet. Oh gosh. The Webster really is a pretty natural movement. Like I said, it's not something that you would really be doing, but as far as the movement itself, rather than a 2-foot punch front flip, it's actually a very natural swinging, lifting motion. Okay.